I know I'm not the only one, right? I know that there's still Rose of Dawn, there's still Sophia Norwitz, there's still a lot of good gender critical transgender people out there who are trying to hold back or fight against some of the insanity that we're facing these days, that the world is facing, that's generating so much backlash. But I need to do my part, and I've wanted to share this for a while. I just have been working a lot, but I wanted to do it in a better form, but I'm just going to do it the way I know it, okay? Anyway, some of you may have heard about this interview, and I'm going to go ahead and play it, and maybe pause every now and then to comment. And then there are some other things I'd like to talk about as well. Okay, so here goes.
I'm legally and medically female, but the people who oppose my existence still want to think of me as male. They use the language of that I'm a man. And so there's this stereotype that men are always stronger than women.
All right, I just want to say that no one opposes Dr. Rachel McKinnon Is Trash's existence. No one opposes that. Maybe some people oppose that, just because this person is absolutely vile, disgusting, classless, has no sense of propriety. But no one is saying this person shouldn't be on the planet. It's not about that. It's about the fact that this person is insisting on being included in a sport that is specifically segregated for sex, because men and women are not made of the same stuff. Let's go on.
And so if you think of trans women as men, then you think there's an unfair advantage.
Sport as a human right.
And there is an unfair
Just
advantage.
explain what that means for you.
We care about the Olympics. We care about our favorite football club. We care about the Rugby World Cup. We care about sport. It is central to society. So if you want to say, well, I believe you're a woman for all of society except this massive central part that is sport, then that's not fair. So fairness is the inclusion of trans women.
It is fair because you're allowed to compete. No one is saying that a transgender person cannot compete. No one is saying that. You are absolutely 100% allowed to compete where you fit in. And where do you fit in? You fit in with the men. Or you fit in a new category, a trans category. The thing is, you are biologically male, right? That is your sex. These sports are segregated by sex because the sexes are not absolutely equal. Men are going to be stronger. They're going to be faster. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. But part of it, a lot of it, has to do with the fact that they have certain hormones. Those hormones that men produce because natural selection has led to this. Our gender is a different thing altogether. So if you want to say, I identify as a gender, so be it. But it's not a gendered class system. It's not that we're separating people on gender. We're separating them on their biological sex. Those two are distinguished.
Do you think you'd have been a world champion cyclist if you hadn't transitioned?
I don't think I am a world champion because I'm a trans woman. I put in the work. And again, we have to remember, I lose most of my races. I've lost against the specific cis women complaining about me being unfair.
The men's 100-metre record is 9.58 seconds. The women's is 10.49 seconds. There is an undisputable advantage for men in sport, isn't there?
We talk about men being faster than women. We have to be very careful what we're talking about. So the example you gave was at the
in speed and strength sports, they have a 10%, 12% advantage in most scientific opinions.
At the elite level, right? So when we look at the very best athletes in men and women, you see this roughly 10 to 12% gap. But if we're talking about like the average man.
Okay, so this is important. Sure, you're talking about elite if you want to go that way. You could say, well, only the best of the best, the men come out on top. Well, what does that mean? You're forcing yourself into a girl's role. So you're taking over the role of role model, idol, right? And then girls are never going to be able to measure up to a man. Of course they're not. Unless, of course, they take steroids, which they could. Is that what you're trying to encourage? Do you want girls to become boys? Is that what you really want? Dr. Rachel McKinnon is trash?
No,
but when we're
true.
talking about the IOC, we're talking about the elite level, aren't we?
Of course. If you look within a single sex event, the difference between first and eighth is very large. And the difference between first and first between sexes is often smaller than the difference between first and eighth within a sex.
So by that logic, would you not have male or female categories whatsoever?
I think that's a great question. I think that's a different question. So I think it's not fair to trans people to say, well, in order to fix whether to include you in sport, let's just radically shift how we do sport. The IOC has no appetite for that at the moment. They are fully committed to only 2 sex categories of sport.
This study by the Swedish university, the Karolinska Institute, which I know you've read closely, it does say that there's very limited change in thigh strength 12 months after transitioning and taking testosterone suppressants. Thigh strength, as you know more than anyone else, obviously a huge thing, particularly in sport, but particularly in track cycling. Do you accept that there may still be an advantage?
Is it possible? Yes. However, the range of body sizes and strength levels within a sport, you can be successful with massively different body composition.
This is a cop-out. Just FYI, this is a cop-out. It's a way of getting around something without actually having to address it.
Even within my sport. So again, a British example would be Victoria Pendleton. Teeny tiny skinny legs, best in the world.
If Chris Hoy was to transition at a master's level, if he was to take testosterone suppressants for 12 months and then compete at a master's level against Victoria Pendleton, he would beat Victoria Pendleton.
Would he?
She would beat Victoria Pendleton.
Would Chris? We don't actually know that. Again,
I'm seeing, just watching this, and it is a great test of my patience, is a man trying to argue his way into a woman's field, into a woman's sport, in a woman's category. A man insisting that he has a right to be there, and he doesn't. You want to pretend that you're a woman, you want to play make-believe all day, be my guest. But you're doing a really bad job at it, and no one's buying it. No one's feeling sad for you, or no one's like, oh yeah, you're standing up for feminism and blah blah blah. No, this is not a feminist. This is not someone who cares about women. This is someone who wants to appropriate a feminine identity and insist that everybody buy into it, eat it. He wants you to eat it, is really what it is. Let's go on.
We are making this massive assumption. But
I think that's a fair assumption to make,
don't
you?
No, we haven't seen this in the rest of sport. So again, trans women have been allowed to openly compete since 2004, since the 2004 Olympics. Since the 2016 Olympics, you didn't require genital surgery, and we didn't see a single trans person. So it was already the case that an unscrupulous country could have taken someone like Chris Hoy and met the testosterone policy, gave him a passport for female, and said, off you go to Rio. Didn't happen. So we've already had 2 Olympic cycles where this could have happened, and it didn't. So when you ask me, well, here's this potential case, what should we do now with real people based on this potential fantasy case? That is not how human rights work.
Is this bigger than...
This is not a human rights issue. No one's saying that Dr. Rachel McKinnon is trash is not allowed to compete. Again, this isn't about a right to compete. You want to compete as a man, so be it. This is about your, I don't want to call it a right because it's not a right. You don't have a right to put yourself in someone else's category. That is not a right. So you want to compete as a man, you want to help create a trans category, be my guest. And I'm sure there will be a lot of trans athletes out there competing against you, especially as those numbers continue to rise. It's actually kind of exploded in recent years. So yeah, I think you should work on that. I think you should stop trying to push yourself and get people to capitulate, because all it's doing is actually generating so much of a backlash that people really, really want you out of the sport. They just want you out, not because they don't want you to compete at all. They just, it's just so much easier not to have you as anyone's problem anymore. Now let's move on to something else. My friend Benjamin Boyce posted this, and again, it's Dr. Rachel McKinnon Is Trash Strikes Again. So I'm going to read some of this stuff, and well, let me know what you guys think about this. There's no need for me to change your misguided opinion on the matter. You don't matter. Sorry, you don't. Everyone who does matter already says, we're real women, really female. My birth certificate, passport, US green card, etc., all say I'm really female. This is why I refuse to debate, live, or otherwise whether trans women are really women. That debate is over. You lost. Your feelings don't trump our rights and basic human dignity. Get a better hobby. Obsessing over trans women is not a good hobby. So, Dr. Rachel McKinnon is trash. And no one is saying anything about your human dignity, your human rights. But the reality is that when it comes to the trans debates, it's not over. You can decide that you don't want to argue about it right now. That's fine. You don't have to debate it. But you can't expect anyone to take you seriously, because it's not settled science. In fact, it's the opposite. The numbers of people coming out as trans has exploded, and there's good reason to believe that it's actually sociological in origin. So people are identifying as something, just like people used to identify as goth or jock. People used to identify as some particular category in order to fit in, so that they feel comfortable, so that people accept them. It's a way of conforming. It's a way of standing out and fitting in. Just the kind of identity crisis that normal teens go through, but unfortunately, it's happening at the age that people are discovering social media. And at the same time, schools are teaching people about gender identities, so that they're starting to consider maybe there's something wrong with them when there's nothing wrong with them, and they really aren't gender dysphoric. And maybe it is that people want to transition because they have a problem with identifying as female, because not that there's anything wrong with being female, but they don't like the way boys treat girls. They don't like the way girls are sexualized. So it's actually a reaction to how depraved we've become as a society. There are a lot of reasons, 1,000,001 reasons right now, that people are starting to question their place, their natural role, their cisgender status. And it's very unfortunate, and it's very heartbreaking, because it's leading to a lot of detransitioners and desisters. And suffice to say, it's actually quite dangerous. So, no, it's not settled science. It's not something that you can say the debate is over. I bet if you did a brain scan on most of those coming out as trans, you'd find that they really are not transgender. if you could definitively prove whether or not they really are trans or not, you'd find out that there's actually psychology to it. And unfortunately, the ones that should be able to diagnose whether they're truly trans or not aren't actually applying real psychology. They're actually executing confirmation bias. They're looking for very particular signs and they're finding them. If you know what you're looking for and you find it, well, don't be surprised. Instead, stop looking for something in particular and just look. And if something stands out, then investigate that. Pry a little bit deeper. But that's not what the doctors are doing. And so our numbers are artificially exploding. And unfortunately, you have a lot of parents that are all on board with it because it scores them some woke points. Okay, and one last thing. Graham Linehan. Some of you may know who he is. Some of you may have seen Father Ted or the IT Crowd. He's a writer for the BBC and he's pretty good. He didn't want to have to talk about this because he keeps getting in trouble for being gender critical. But you know what? I'm glad that he did. And this is not the first time I've heard about this, but it seems to be getting worse. So let's have a quick read and then I'll explain what's going on. So, police forces let rapists record their gender as female. Police forces are recording suspected and convicted rapists as female if they no longer wish to identify with their male birth sex. 6 forces, including South Yorkshire and Thames Valley, disclose under Freedom of Information laws that if someone is arrested for or convicted of rape, the official record will state the gender they chose to identify themselves as. What does this mean? It means that men who are raping women get to identify as women. And potentially, it means they get to go to women's prisons where they may rape again. And this has happened if you're familiar with Karen White. This also means that the statistics may very well be off when you look at violent sexual offenses perpetuated by women when in fact they were probably committed by men. Now, that's not transphobic. This is the reality of it. That is the biological sex. And it really should be based on the biological sex. Because believe it or not, biological sex dictates a lot. It actually can inform your behavior. It informs your psychology because your brain was shaped under certain chemical influences. And whether or not you're under that influence still changes nothing because your brain's already been formed, right? So here's what I would say. Create a new kind of ID. And it's not just in England. We need everywhere. Anywhere that allows trans women, right? Or trans men. If you're going to have gender identity be a thing, if you're going to have the freedom to live as a gender that you want, be my guest. Have that gender reflected on your ID, but also have the sex as well. And your sex and your gender, unless you're, cisgender or whatever, are not the same thing. So does it make sense that your ID should have the same information on it? At any rate, I'm going to leave it here. I don't want to make this video go on too much longer. I do hope to make some more videos and maybe generate some better content. I'm getting a new computer, getting new software, but I just wanted to share some of this insanity with you because, well, things aren't getting any better and we need more people like me, transsexual or transgender or whatever you want to say. We need more people speaking out, speaking up on the side of rationality. I think that's important, don't you? So yeah, I'll leave it here and I'll see you all later. Have a good day.